New Zealand, the largest landmass above sea level of a vast continent that broke away from Gondwana land. 23 million years after the landscape emerged from the ocean depths, it's still as diverse as it is unique. Remote corners of this world have seldom been seen. Isolated and rugged, unique plants and creatures have evolved that are found nowhere else on Earth. Since the arrival of human life, this wilderness and many species have been under threat, some lost forever. But today, almost a third of this dynamic country has been protected. 14 national parks have been established to preserve this diverse landscape and the multitude of life that live here. Gus Roxburgh is an environmental specialist and adventure guide who's heading out to explore the country's wilderness and discover the often unseen backcountry world of these national parks. 125 years after the first national park was created, he wants to capture a sense of what these ever-evolving conservation parks have become through the people who work, play, and preserve the wilderness that is our national parks.
And I think you'll find it's quite possibly the best backyard in the world.
Fiordland, a massive masterpiece. "500 million years of constant sculpting, relentlessly ground, split and pressured by the elements. Māori call this place Atawhenua, the Shadowland. Demigod, Tuturaki Whanua, is said to have used his adze to carve the fjords from rock. Today, scientists know that the adze that formed the fjords were made of ice. Ancient glaciers carved this towering and tortuous landscape during the last major phase of glaciation 20,000 years ago. Given Conservation Park status in 1952, this is the biggest national park in New Zealand and one of the largest in the world. It spans almost 13,000 square kilometers, 5% of New Zealand's total land area. A dense blanket of ancient rainforest hangs precariously from the steep-sided fjords. With an international reputation as a preeminent World Heritage Park, this sanctuary is one of the most dynamic in the world. The immense granite barriers create an impenetrable wall, repelling everything that's thrown their way. Everything except the weather. This dynamic topography drives the extreme conditions. Fiordland is one of the wettest locations in New Zealand. 7 meters of rain annually. Over 3 times as much as the Amazon basin. Rainwater that melds into torrents, that burst down canyons, off the edge of sheer cliffs and plummets to the fjords below. One of the most renowned is the Bowen Falls.
So Dave, you guys were in here yesterday. How much water was flowing down here?
Probably about half that, I reckon.
So it's come up that much just with that bit of rain overnight?
Yeah, you'd call that drizzle here.
Dave Vass is a commercial canyon guide who thrives on getting up close to the challenging, unexplored ravines and countless waterfalls throughout the park.
I wouldn't say hostile environment, but a changeable one. Water's your big issue. The canyons are drain pipes, you know, and they're shedding a big, steep, clean sort of catchment. All the valleys around here are very steep-sided. There's hundreds of unexplored canyons that, you know, incredible natural arenas that no one's even seen.
Yeah.
They don't even know they're there.
I mean, it's pretty amazing that you can come to a place like this and still do something for the first time.
Which is exactly what we're hoping to do today. Abseil the full 161-metre length of Bowen Falls.
So this has actually never been done before, the whole thing?
Not that I know of.
Well, what do you think? Is it worth us giving it a shot today?
I would.
But in true Fiordland style, the rain drives in harder, and we'll have to abort our mission till the conditions improve.
It's here in Fiordland's prehistoric beach forest that the massive rainfall fuels a dynamic ecosystem. These dense rainforests date back millions of years, relics from a time when dinosaurs ruled the earth. The high rainfall nourishes a diverse range of vegetation and fungi that scatter the tree trunks. This lush, temperate forest features over 700 species of plants. This untouched wilderness is also home to ancient creatures that are found nowhere else on Earth. The giant native centipede and this jointed invertebrate, the peripatus, lurk in the damp undergrowth.
When the weather window finally opens, the Bowen Falls are ready to be tackled.
Right, Gus, we'll have to find an anchor between here and the ground. So, hopefully on that big, dry, sunny ledge, we'll find a little something. But to get to the big, dry, sunny ledge, Gus, looks like we're getting a little wet in the spray. And it's going to be the most difficult abseil because it's quite slippery looking.
The first ever full descent of the 161-metre high falls. It's hard to believe that this is only half the volume of water that was powering over here yesterday. The moss-covered walls of the near-vertical granite face are not only treacherous to descend, but these cliff faces are often the only footing some trees and vegetation can cling to and feed off. It takes a good 3 hours to finally get to the bottom, but what an amazing experience.
It's unbelievable. I totally see what you mean when you say you've come here to find something bigger than yourself, because I don't think I've ever done anything like that.
The colossal volumes of fresh water that cascade down these granite walls etch their way into the salty seawater below. This fresh water has been stained by tannins as it passed through the native vegetation and layers of rotting leaf litter. It creates a noticeable freshwater layer on the surface.
This environment is like nowhere else in the world. The tannins actually block the sun's rays, causing deep water creatures to live in shallower conditions. This black coral is 200 years old, and it's amazing to see it at this depth. Usually you'd have to dive to over 300 meters to see them in such abundance. Fiordland has one of the largest populations in the world, with over 7 million colonies thriving in these depths. Although the fjords extend to depths of over 400 meters, marine life disappears quickly below the top 40 meters. Marine life that lives near the surface is now protected in 10 reserves, scattered throughout the park. These marine reserves protect native species against the ongoing threat of human interference. This resident pod of bottlenose dolphins have had 2 successful breeding seasons, with calf survival rates now the highest they've been in a decade.
G'day, little fella.
There's a New Zealand fur seal. Yep.
New Zealand fur seal.
New Zealand fur seal, yeah. Kekino. From early 1800s right through to 1889, they were hunted.
Fiona Lee's been guiding kayaking adventures in Fiordland for 10 years.
And they were hunted for their skins or their fur and also for the oil. And they would pull out about 60 to 70,000 skins at a time. They were essentially one boatload away from extinction.
In 1792, a party of sealers spent 10 months in the fjords collecting 4,500 seal skins. In the following 30 years, the fur seal population was almost wiped out.
And these are protected now, aren't they?
They're protected, yeah. They were one of the first marine mammals to be protected in New Zealand waters. And yeah, they're certainly coming back really well with their numbers, which is brilliant.
While this is a world that seems almost untouched and impenetrable, the lure of the fjords has seen explorers determined to get here, no matter what the landscape threw at them. Milford Sound, the face of Fiordland National Park. A seemingly untouched world. But this iconic inlet draws over 40,000 visitors every year. It's a 16-kilometre journey from the open ocean to the tiny settlement of Milford. But the lure of this landscape isn't new. It began over 100 years ago. In 1878, Donald Sutherland was the first European resident of Milford Sound. Called the Hermit of Milford, he lived off the land and was determined to develop the region's tourist potential. He built 3 thatched huts and called his settlement the City of Milford. 10 years later, Sutherland and Quentin McKinnon cut the fledgling Milford Track. Following an old Maori trail from Lake Tiano to the head of Milford Sound. Soon after, the tourists flooded in. Accommodation sprang up, and Milford's future was assured.
Today, the Milford Track is one of New Zealand's great walks, and over 14,000 people tramp its 54 kilometres every year. It's acknowledged as one of the finest multi-day walks in the world, taking in some of the most dramatic wilderness on the planet, like the Sutherland Falls. Named after the man who was instrumental in opening up the region to tourism, the 500-metre-high falls are among the tallest in the world. It makes you wonder how many valleys in this area those early explorers must have gone up, only to be met by some of these sheer rock faces at the end. Today, well, this is your veritable 4-lane paved superhighway of tramping tracks.
Well, it's a pretty full-time job for quite a few of us. We have between 5 and 7 full-time field staff, clearing tracks, a whole lot. So yeah, no, it's pretty busy, very busy.
Grant Tremaine is part of the dock team charged with maintaining the tracks and huts in this vast wilderness.
Nice.
Is it a bit of a balance, Grant? For dock, you've got to open up these places for use, but you've got to conserve them as well.
Yeah, it is a balancing act. I suppose what we want to do is just get people out there using it and balance the different kinds of users as well. So people that just want to come out for a day, or the hardcore tramper, they don't want to experience little bridges over every creek. They want to get their feet wet and get muddy. So yeah, I think we do it well, and we're lucky in Fiordland. We've got all the room in the world to have the whole spectrum of different opportunities for people.
There are tens of thousands of people that trek Fiordland's 500 kilometres of track. But over 1 million people enter Fiordland every year by road. The only paved access into Milford Sound is the Milford Road. As it winds through the floor of the Hollyford Valley, the danger of rockfall and avalanches often results in the road being closed. With the high peaks and vast snowfields above the road receiving over 70 metres of snow every year, the avalanche risk is huge. Near vertical walls and large, steep snow basins provide an ideal breeding ground for these giant masses of snow and ice. These snowpacks can be triggered into avalanches by gravity, new snow, wind, and temperature changes. There are 54 known avalanche paths above the Milford Road. They're actively managed by deliberately inciting avalanches with explosives dropped from helicopters when the road below is safely closed. Triggered high in the mountains, avalanches can travel at 300 to 400 kilometers per hour across the valley floor. The impact pressure of avalanches can be up to 5,000 kilopascals. Knowing that the pressure needed to break a car windscreen is just 15 kilopascals brings home the danger to any unwitting cars below. The massive effort required to monitor, manage, and clean up rockfalls and avalanches means it costs 5 times more to maintain 1 kilometre of Milford Road than any other road in New Zealand.
Everybody that comes here holds this place in awe. They reckon it's a pretty severe piece of landscape to manage and keep open, really.
Wayne Carron leads a specialist road management team on the Milford Road. Being an alpine highway, rock slides such as this one can play havoc year-round. But it's often the threat of avalanches that can seriously affect the road during June to November.
It's a real roller coaster, really, as far as prediction and weather forecasting goes, really.
And then you've obviously got this terrain and a road right beneath it. It's a bit of a perfect storm for avalanches.
Absolutely. It's a pretty humbling place to work in.
How do you predict what's going to happen here?
You use everything available to you here, really. We've got a complex weather station network coupled with cameras now, so we can actually see what's going on as well. Everybody wants to know when it's going to be open and how long it's closed for, so your assessment comes out of a helicopter, and that's all weather reliant too, really.
Well, there must be a bit of pressure on you too, though. I mean, these tourism operators want to get those people through to Milford.
Personally, I don't feel that pressure, because in the end, they're not going to thank you for bearing them in an avalanche. I think you just do it for the right reasons. Don't be frightened to just slam it closed, you know, if it looks like it's changing pretty dramatically, close it.
At the highest point in the Milford Road, the 1.2 kilometre long Homer Tunnel pierces the solid granite rock of the Darren mountain range before dropping into the Milford Sound below. Over 250,000 vehicles pass through the Homer Tunnel every year. Work on the tunnel began in 1935, initially by just a handful of men armed with picks and wheelbarrows, and it was finally completed almost 20 years later. Work was hampered by the constant threat from avalanches. Most workers were paid on a contract basis, determined by their progress. Their earnings were often extremely low due to the hardness of the rock and the harsh conditions. And with the human population now flooding into the fjords by water, by foot and by road, the native inhabitants were bound to be affected. The sheer mountainsides in Fiordland National Park can be 1,000 meters high. Near impassable for anyone or anything trying to get in or around these valleys. All that is, except the mighty Kia. The world's only alpine parrot. The thick feathers protect them from the often freezing temperatures. But there's one thing that's legendary with these inquisitive birds. They're highly intelligent. It's a trait that's been vital to their survival in these harsh conditions, finding innovative ways to search and forage for food. They have an irresistible urge to explore, manipulate, and test the environment. But it was their powerful claws and beak that saw the government pay a bounty for every Kia killed, as they preyed on livestock, especially sheep. Kias are tenacious and ride their victims, possibly the same way they clung to moa birds in an earlier time. The Kia knows it can dig easily into the lower back of the sheep, above the kidneys where the fatty tissue is an easy meal. More than 150,000 Kia were culled up until 1970, when the bounty was eventually lifted. Today, the mountain parrot is just one of the native species that have managed to survive in the relative safety of Fiordland. Tucked in beside iconic Mitre Peak, the steep terrain surrounding Sinbad Gully has slowed the invasion of introduced predators, allowing ancient species to survive.
It's a long way from civilization and a hell of a commute for dock ranger James Reardon, who's conducting research work into these native species. There are still new varieties being discovered out here in this wilderness. Here in Sinbad Gully, there's a focus on maintaining pest control to allow these ancient lizards to increase in number.
These are little tiny lizards, basically.
Yeah.
And with the photographs, what we can get is individual marking
Beautiful.
characteristics. You get
Yeah.
the spots on the side of the body.
James is the dock technical officer responsible for threatened fauna and ecosystem management in Fiordland. The Sinbad skink is just one of the species he's monitoring.
So you're still
And-
finding brand new species up here, things that have never been seen before.
Well, you're on the edge of 1.3 million hectares of largely undeveloped Fiordland here, so goodness knows what's tucked away in there.
What else has been found up in this area?
Well, amazingly enough, there's 3 species of lizards up here, and that is remarkable. We're in an alpine environment in a temperate country. I mean, anywhere else in the world you'd be struggling to get one lizard, if any. In most places there's none. One of the things we're really interested in finding out is whether they're only in this spot because this is just a very special little environment for them, or whether they actually historically would have been throughout this landscape and pests have meant that they're now only found in these sort of more remote areas.
I guess the thing is, you're in a little lost world really up here, and there's no telling what else could be out sitting down there.
Well, just that ridge in front of you there was one of the last places that kakapo were removed from Fiordland.
Really? So there were kakapo living in this valley?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were kakapo absolutely everywhere before pests got to New Zealand. I mean, literally everywhere. But then even after pests got here, they hung on in these sorts of places because the ability for rats and stoats and so on to move into these environments, obviously they can get here, but they're limited by the terrain. The flow of them is reduced compared to sort of low down in valley bottoms. So we've got a bit of a natural advantage to managing species potentially in these habitats if we can understand what the pests are doing.
You guys go to a huge amount of trouble though to look for these little skinks. I mean, some people might say, why bother?
Yeah, I mean, it's a moral values thing, really. I mean, if you don't worry about biodiversity, then let it disappear. But let's face it, humanity persists on the basis of ecosystem function. And ecosystems are incredibly complex. We are not about to say this species matters and that one doesn't. You need to keep biodiversity for the future wealth of humanity.
But this is an isolated environment that has remained virtually untouched and survived for millions of years. While its isolation has allowed local species to survive, its seclusion is also being used to preserve and restore other populations from around New Zealand that are on the brink of extinction. Unoccupied, peaceful, and a snapshot of a New Zealand before humans arrived, Dusky Sound in Fiordland National Park is like no other place in New Zealand. "40 kilometres long, Dusky is one of the least touched by humans.
There's no road access into Dusky. It's an hour by helicopter from Te Anau or an arduous day by sea from Milford Sound. This isolation and strict management of the number of boats allowed in these waters has contributed to its pristineness.
So this is coming into Pickersgill Harbour, Gus. This is where Captain Cook came in.
Greg Hay is a part owner of one of the few boats that have a dock permit to offer charters in Dusky, taking travellers into New Zealand's past.
I backed the boat in, had it anchored, and then there was actually a tree, a very strategically placed tree, which had fallen off the bank, and they used that as their gangway to walk from the boat.
Right. So he was standing here for what, 6 weeks?
He came in here for 6 weeks with his crew. I mean, the boat was only about 30 feet larger than the Pembroke, which we're on now, but he had 90 people on board.
And a bunch of, probably a few sheep and cows and what have you too, yeah?
I think it was a mini version of the Ark. I think he had a menagerie on board.
It's a well-known fact that when humans stepped onto New Zealand soil, they arrived with new animals, some that have gone on to decimate our indigenous species. Fiordland is no different, with a number of species overtaken by introduced predators.
Paul, the bears next door. Well, as a company, Peregrine's been involved in the avian conservation side of Fiordland for around about 5 years, mainly with the saddleback birds and also with the mohua birds, but and that's in conjunction with the Department of Conservation and the Fiordland Conservation Trust.
A winemaker by trade, Greg's company have paid for the pest eradication and subsequent release of native saddlebacks on Resolution Island here in the Sounds.
It was only 40 years ago the saddleback got down to the last 24 birds in existence. And 24 birds faced with a fleet of rats after them, it's probably like a week away from being extinct. Since the arrival of humans into New Zealand, there's been around about 55 odd species of birds that have become extinct, and most of these birds were endemic to New Zealand, so they weren't actually found anywhere else. They were our birds, specific to New Zealand. So it's just nice to kind of put a flag in the sand and go, okay, we're going to do what we can as a company. You can sit back and do nothing, but I think that would be a tragedy if you have the ability and the desire to go, well, we'd actually quite like to do something. And you do notice the difference really quickly. We used to pull up here and go for a walk on the land, and it was actually like there was no sound whatsoever. It was actually just very quiet. And over the last 7 or 8 years, every time you come back, it was like sitting in a theatre and listening to various parts of a orchestra crank up. And so for the first year, you might have heard that instrument going, which was one bird, and then the next year there was like that bird and that bird. And now you pull up the boat here, and in the mornings or the evenings, it's like listening to the whole orchestra playing, and it wasn't there 8 years ago.
I mean, if you had to describe your connection to this place, you've been back here a lot, how would you describe it?
There's a tranquility about it, but there's a real power about it as well. You know, if you've been on a tramp for like a whole day long with a very heavy pack and you get to a hut and you take your pack off, you feel like kind of flying slightly.
Yeah.
That's what, for me, it's like coming in here. It's just really uplifting. This is kind of probably what it looked like 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. And there's not many places like that left in the world.
The dawn chorus that was lost from this land for a century is gradually returning. But elsewhere in the park, the battle to protect our natural heritage is still raging. Fiordland National Park. It was here that the concept of conservation lifeboat islands first emerged. Island sanctuaries purged of predators that nurse critically endangered species back from the brink of extinction.
And one in particular is like only a handful on the planet. Resolution Island lives up to its title, resolute and remote, positioned to protect and nurture endangered native species. I vaguely remember learning something about this place when I was at school, but when you actually come here, the history just completely comes to life. Because just up behind me there is the site of New Zealand's first house, or the first European house anyway, and just in this cove here was where they built the first ship. And it was all done by a bunch of sealers who were dropped off here to do their nasty seal clubbing business just 20 years after Cook was first here. Now the sealers are long gone, and this island's been trapped of all the predators. This place is home to about a third of the kakapo that are left in the whole world.
Before the arrival of introduced predators, kakapo had no natural enemies. They adapted to become fat, slow, and flightless. When European settlers brought introduced animals such as weasels, ferrets, and stoats, they had an immediate impact, decimating native bird populations. Innovative efforts would be required to save our vulnerable native birds from extinction. In 1891, Resolution Island in Dusky Sound was chosen as New Zealand's first sanctuary. The first caretaker, Richard Henry, is regarded as the grandfather of New Zealand's conservation movement. He single-handedly pioneered the science of island sanctuaries, transferring over 700 kakapo and kiwi. But this first attempt failed. The island was slowly overrun by stoats and rats, which managed to swim the kilometre from the mainland. But after a fuller understanding of predators' capabilities, Richard Henry's concept became a success. It would eventually inspire a renaissance of pest eradication work and native bird relocations long after his death.
At over 400 metres deep, Lake Horoko is the country's deepest and one of our most southern. And it's here that conservation meets commerce in a very simple concept. Visitors here can now receive a free jet boat ride, cross the lake and down the river rapids, if they sponsor a local stoat trapping program.
Over the years that we've been operating, the decline in the birds has been amazing. So we've decided that we were going to do something about it, and we've been putting stoat traps out over the last 6.5 years.
Johan and Joyce have been running their jet boat tours for years, but only recently started the stoat trap initiative. So this is the little bugger that's causing so much damage around here?
Yeah, they're perfect killers. They're not killing because they're hungry a lot of the time, they just do it.
Is this the future for conservation, Joyce? Getting people involved with it like this?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that everybody can do their bit.
It may be just a small operation, but Johan and Joyce, with the support of many customers, have eradicated over 400 stoats in the past year. Knowing that one stoat is estimated to kill a native bird a day, then over the past year it's possible they may have saved over 100,000 native birds.
I think that we have a job to take as many people as we can and show them and let them appreciate this place for what it is, and it's gorgeous.
The Fiordland region has a history of fighting for the preservation of its wilderness. From individual initiatives to larger collective efforts that motivate the entire country. In the 1960s and 1970s, Lake Manapōuri was the focus of one of New Zealand's most important conservation battles. The Manapōuri power station draws water from the lake for power generation. When a proposal was put forward to raise lake levels to increase power generation, the public of New Zealand fought back.
Do we want to protect our national heritage?
A line was drawn in the sand in what is now heralded as the birthplace of New Zealand's conservation movement.
And we're doing this for our children and for you.
Thousands of New Zealanders protested, and over 265,000 signed a petition demanding a back down.
Yes, I think we've got to make a stand now. Otherwise it'll just keep going and going, won't it? In the name of progress, they'll destroy every beautiful thing we've got.
The people won. The public pressure saw the lake granted statutory protection by the government. Lake levels are now carefully controlled to mimic natural fluctuations. Today, conservationists and concerned members of the public are preparing for another battle.
There's always been debate about opening up Fiordland more for tourism. They've been talking for years about pushing this road all the way down the Holyford track and up the west coast. But the latest idea is a tunnel from Glenorchy over on the Queenstown side. It's going to come through all the way under the mountains and come out just up there. And I reckon massive privately owned developments like that don't belong in a place like this. This is a national park, which means it belongs to all of us. In fact, this is a World Heritage Area, so technically it belongs to the whole world. Anyway, the whole thing seems crazy. Just to get the punters through to Milford a couple of hours quicker. It's not going to happen.
Fiordland National Park, the Shadowland, a granite wilderness that's persisted through millennia. Species and ecosystems have survived in the isolation, while some are still fragile. Introduced predators have been vilified for decimating native species, but the biggest threat to this unspoiled masterpiece is still the human race. Will these towering fjords be capable of repelling the next wave of interest from those hungry to take advantage of one of the most unique national parks in the world?
Personally, I love the fact that I can look at a map of the South Island and know there's this huge chunk of land down the bottom that's locked up and undeveloped. Now, I know we all look across the ditch jealously at the Australians with all that mineral wealth, but there's real wealth in a place like this. When I studied environmental management at university, we talked about these places as having an intrinsic value, and that's the value that somewhere like this has just left on its own for its own sake, and you can't put a price on it. And the great thing is, when the Australians have dug up the outback and are just left with a dirty great hole, we're going to have all of this.